Hello, and welcome to Raised by Horror. Raised by Horror is an inclusive podcast for grown-up latchkey kids of all genders and all orientations, whose proxy parenting was done by horror films and books. We are your hosts, Richard Kadri and Violet Blue. Check out raisedbyhorror.com for more info. In this episode, we're talking about Oscar nominations, Heretic, Nosferatu, new films in theaters, and horror books we're excited about. Hello, Richard.
Hello. I'm really looking forward to getting into this stuff.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So let's dive right into Oscar nominations. What do you think?
It's really interesting to see both Substance and Nosferatu on there.
Right.
Especially Substance's Best Picture. This is the seventh time that a horror movie has ever gotten a Best Picture nomination in the 96-year history of the Academy Awards.
It's almost 100 years old.
Yep. This is the seventh time.
That's just shameful that they've been overlooking horror this long.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. And I mean, you and I always agree that sorry, not Heretic. I'm like excited to talk about Heretic. But you and I always agree on like horror films that were robbed of Oscars. So
Absolutely.
There are many.
Absolutely. I mean, I always think of Hereditary as the first one.
Yes, Toni Collette and Hereditary, like completely robbed, right?
Toni Collette's amazing in that movie.
Oh my God. Like, it's still with me, her performance. Like, I can still see it when I close my eyes. It's terrible. I love it. Oh my God. Yeah, The Substance has 5 nominations, which is wild, including Best Picture, Director, Actress, Screenplay. I mean, and Demi Moore, like, finally getting recognized is so huge.
Finally.
Right?
But she's been doing this for 30 some odd years now.
Oh my God, and she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is well deserved. And I mean, and I'm not as big a fan of The Substance as some of my friends are, but I'm really pulling for this. Like, I hope she gets it. I mean,
Me too.
She's up against some, like, you know, things that are very Hollywood that I could see would make the establishment very happy to give Best Actress to, right?
Yeah.
But I'm still pulling for her, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's same thing with directing and Best Picture. It'll be interesting to see how this comes off. If it's just, I don't know. It's just, if it's Hollywood making themselves feel good by picking a movie a little out of left field because they've done that before, or if they're really going to give the thing respect.
Right.
Especially the director, Carolee Forget.
And Margaret Qualley, who didn't get mentioned at all, who was I'm such a fan of her now.
Yeah, I think she got robbed a little.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
So I have a list here of some of the few other horror films that have ever been nominated.
Mm-hmm.
Exorcist, Jaws, Silence of the Lambs, Sixth Sense, Black Swan, and Get Out.
Yep.
And
Get Out.
Yeah, and Get Out is the most recent one. That was 2017, which is a long time ago now. So Hollywood is sleeping on horror. They're not getting it.
Definitely.
And Nosferatu. Go ahead.
No, I think the one before Get Out would be like The Sixth Sense, maybe, and that's a long gap. That's a long gap.
Yeah. Let's just hope that they're not doing like token horror noms, you know?
Right.
But there are 3 films though that are nominated. It's Substance, Nosferatu, and Alien Romulus, which surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see so much horror, you know, in the Oscars, because they usually, like, you know, it's too icky for them to, they lift up their petticoats before stepping over the puddle, you know, when it comes to horror.
Right.
It's like, ew. And Nosferatu, I think so Nosferatu has 3, I think, or 4.
4.
Right. It's production design, cinematography, costume, hair, and makeup. And
yes.
I think they're getting ripped off too, honestly. Like, just that film is so gorgeous and so incredible. And the performances, oh my God, the performances are so off the hook
Yeah.
that I'm just like, yeah, I wish that it was nominated in similar categories as The Substance. Like, I really do.
Me too. I would like to see Lily Rose Depp on there somewhere.
Right? Yes. Yes, absolutely. And Simon McBurney, who played Herr Knock, which was just
Oh,
like,
Knock was great. Yeah, what a great
oh,
character.
right? And then the last Oscar nom in horror is Alien Romulus, which I don't know. You and I may disagree on this. It's nominated for Best Visual Effects. What do you think of that?
I'm not a fan of the movie. It put me off very quickly, and I think some of the effects are nice, but not all of them. I mean, the resurrected.
Oh man, Ian Holm.
Ian Holm. That really put me off. I mean,
me too.
It just seemed like a stunt.
It did, and I had to go look up and see like what if that was something that was okay. And I guess the family gave permission for that, but I still don't like it. Like, it still really just rubs me the wrong way, and they had to fix it basically in post.
Exactly, they had to do another version for the release.
Right, for the Blu-ray.
It just felt like, to me, it just felt like cheap fan service. And a lot of that, I think that's what put me off about that movie. A lot of it felt like fan service.
Yeah, I know. I did like, I mean, in terms of visual effects, I did love the interiors of the spaceships, but that's kind of one of my things, is that I loved all the consoles and just like the faithful recreation of like Nostromo-esque things. And I thought there was a scene at the end where the spaceship is like basically coming apart and stuff. And that looked really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
I didn't really think the rest of it held up. And I, like, in terms of just, if I'm going to say all my criticisms of the film, really, it felt like it was a film that was made to be a video game, or that it was a video game derived film. Like, I felt like each sequence I was watching is like, oh, and this is where you take the gun and you have a limited amount of ammo and you have to shoot the things in the air. Like, that kind of stuff. I don't know.
That's a really good way to put it. The moment you said that, it's like, yes, that's how it feels to me too. Like trying to that they tried to extract a movie from a game. Right.
And I'm going to say, like, to my fellow gamers, like, no shame on the original Alien game, because oh my God, that was incredible space horror as a game. And like, I didn't finish it. It was like one of the few games that was that was really too hard for me to finish. I could not get the stealth right, but it was scary and really good. It still holds up, like, as a game. So I'm not shaming Alien games or gaming or anything like that, but it just, it felt distracting the way that it was all presented. So
yeah.
I mean, hey, if they win Best Visual Effects, then that's great, because it's a win for horror, and it's a win for Alien, which I'm a big fan of the franchise.
Me too.
That's great. And last year, the winner was Godzilla -1, which is pretty heavy competition. Like, that film is an absolute masterpiece. So good on them if they get it. But I'm still just like, yeah.
Yeah, but with the film overall, I can't get excited about it. But I know it's popular, and God love everybody who enjoyed the film.
Yes, exactly. We are not shaming. We are not Romulus shaming.
No,
we'll leave that to pitch meeting. Pitch meeting can shame.
Oh yes. Oh yes. They did. In fact, there's a really good pitch meeting for it.
Yeah, I had to watch that.
Yeah,
I had to. I watched pitch meeting to heal after I feel like hurt, like where I'm like, show me on the film where the film hurt me. Like, yes. I go to pitch meeting for that. Well, of films that, well, should have been nominated, I feel like Heretic was one of them.
Definitely. I think it's I mean, we're talking about Silence of the Lambs. I do get a kind of relentlessness, like with Mr. Reed in there. There is a Hannibal Lecter quality to his intellect and creepiness.
Oh my God. It is just unbearable the way that he gets under your skin in Heretic. And I'm not a big Silence of the Lambs fan. So, but I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of like Anthony Hopkins' performance.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And and Heretic, I mean, what a great turn for Hugh Grant to just play something so diabolical.
And using a lot of the skills he's used before in rom-coms, where he just
Yeah.
he can smile through everything.
He's disarming.
Like no matter how creepy he gets, he can then back off and give them a little bit of a smile, and then kind of come for them again.
Yes. Okay. Let's tell everyone what Heretic is about, basically,
Yes.
for people who haven't, or for people who have seen it. Like, let's.
Okay. All right. Well, this is all spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, get ready.
Yep.
As we open, we meet Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. Paxton. Thank you.
Yeah.
Both members of the Mormon Church. Sister Paxton is a true believer and comes across a little naive as she tries to navigate, the modern world. Sister Barnes is a bit more worldly and less wide-eyed. She's experienced more of the real world. And they're both on a mission. Well, they're on their Mormon mission, which is, to proselytize to people and try and get them in the church. So it's, you can tell they're a little out of place in the world. And it's emphasized when they meet a group of local girls who seem really friendly. And they start, stopping for selfies and stuff. And then they're ultimately horribly mocked as they humiliate Sister Paxton by pulling down her skirt in public.
Right.
And that sets kind of a tone for their place in the world for the rest of the movie. They're they're just pushing their way through the modern world, but they're dedicated to their mission.
Right. To their belief.
Absolutely.
And when Sister Paxton has her skirt pulled down by the selfie girls, like afterward she's crying. Like she's hurt by the world. And so you get this sense of Sister Paxton also being the more sensitive one of the two.
Yes, very much. One of the people who asked about to have missionaries come to his home to talk about the religion is a Mr. Reed. And they go to his house. It's raining. It's really unpleasant when they get there.
It's freezing cold.
Yeah. And they explain to Mr. Reed, as miserable as it is outside, they can't go inside without a woman present.
Right. It's against the rules of their church.
Exactly.
And I'm just going to do a quick parenthetical here. Mr. Reed is played by Hugh Grant.
Yes.
Sophie Thatcher plays Sister Barnes, and Sister Paxton is played by Chloe East. And Hugh Grant is basically in like a dad sweater all the time. He's got that sort of warm, homey vibe to him.
And at the beginning of the film, he's using that rom-com thing where he's a little, it's not quite the stuttery, old, Hugh Grant, but it's verging on it, where it's just like, he comes across, he's playing it kind of like, oh, this is charming, and maybe I'm a little naive, so let's all go in and have a nice time together, and we'll just have this chat. Let's just have a chat.
Right. It's all, oh gosh, silly old me sort of thing.
Exactly.
And he sort of plays up the for the American audience, he really plays up the sort of doddering British charm, right? And
absolutely.
And you just kind of see that as they are going up to and then into his house, he convinces them to come in by saying that his wife is in the kitchen making pie.
Blueberry pie specifically.
Right. But as they're going in, you really get this vibe from the shots and the cinematography that it's like a they're going into a cabin in the woods, or they're entering like the where the witch is gonna bake them into pies, like the candy house kind of a thing.
Right. It's
It looks
immediately,
like that.
it looks like it's decorated in the very, kind of banal way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, easing people in, but at the same time, it's kind of claustrophobic. They're all sitting kind of close to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it he brings out sodas for them,
Mm-hmm.
and
Which they don't drink.
which they don't drink. But again,
Because
and that he plays off as a little like, oh, I'm naive. I forgot you don't do caffeine.
mm-hmm.
Um,
But at the same time, like, we've built up so much tension. Like, you can tell that he's like, oh, my wife's in the kitchen. I'll see if I can get her to come out. And you're
mhm.
like already thinking like, that's probably not going to happen. And
Right.
the girls go in the house and they sit down to talk to him about, the, Jesus Christ is our Lord and the whole thing. And you're just kind of like relieved when they don't sip the sodas, because
Yes.
you're already feeling something is wrong. I mean, and thank goodness we feel that something is wrong, because otherwise, why are we watching the movie, right?
Right. Exactly.
but the tension is already just immediate. It's immediate and thick.
Exactly. And that it escalates quickly from there, because they at first kind of banter about the church, and
Mm-hmm.
Sister Paxton is really eager to explain things to Reed about their religion. And he has a very well worn copy of the Book of Mormon, and they're very excited, like, wow, you've really studied up.
And they're
You're
kind of
really,
surprised too, because he
yes.
seemed more naive up to that point.
And that's when things go off the rails,
Mm-hmm.
because the questions go from very general stuff that he starts asking uncomfortable questions about Mormonism, and immediately goes to polygamy,
Right.
which the young women explain that, well, doctrine can be changed through revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And that just sets Reed off more to probe in an even more uncomfortable way.
Right. Right.
So we're getting the tension is rising all the way through, but nothing bad has happened. It's just a uncomfortable conversation that the young women thought was going to be easy.
And it's a pervasive sense of wrongness as well,
Mm-hmm.
where you're realizing that time has gone by and there's still no wife.
Yes, exactly. And that's where things take another sinister turn, where Reed leaves the room allegedly to bring his wife in.
To go get her,
And,
because they're finally like, hey, so we really need to meet your wife. And he's like, oh gosh, silly me. And he gets up and leaves the room.
and that's when he bought out the sodas. It was on a little tray with the sodas and a little candle. It was very pretty. And when he leaves, that's when Barnes discovers that the smell of blueberry pie was really a blueberry scented candle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's when they get up and they start to realize that they are locked in the house. They
Right.
can't get the front door open.
And there's no cell service.
Right, right. And they're trying to decide what to do. They're looking at the windows. They're realizing they can't get out the windows.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, when they were talking with Mr. Reed and he was playing cat and mouse with them, the lights had gone out, and you realize that the lights were on a mechanical timer.
Right.
And you're starting to feel like they're in some sort of like Rube Goldberg mousetrap or
Mm-hmm.
something of a house.
Yes.
And they can't get the front door open. They can't get any messages out. So they decide to go see where Mr. Reed went.
Because they have to get their coats, which he took with them, because the coats have the keys to their bike lock, which is outside. So even if they can get out, it's miles and miles back to where they need to go.
Through what is now a storm.
A really nasty freezing storm. They go into the library. They find him in the library, where Reed keeps up being fairly charming. That's when he explains, oh, the door won't open because it's on a time lock, which I know is eccentric. But there are two doors in the library, and they can leave through one of the two doors. That'll take them right outside.
Mm-hmm. He says, you
And,
can leave through the back. It's perfectly fine.
mm-hmm. And now the doors, pretty much for the rest of the movie, become the center of tension.
Mm-hmm.
And also Hebe takes a really sinister turn at this point when he finally turns to them, still kind of charming,
Mm-hmm.
and says, do you still believe that my wife is really in the next room just because I told you so?
Right.
And do you believe in your religion just because someone told you to?
And that's when they say, no, we really have to go. We've gotten messages and we've had a call. So
Right.
we have to leave. And he says, oh, go right ahead. Your coats are right there. You can leave through the back. And they pick up their coats and you see them sort of look for the key to their bike lock. And it's been placed in a different coat pocket, which they both
Right.
notice.
Right. And that becomes important later. It's such a small thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it shows how much Reedus thought everything out. He's
Right.
always one step ahead of them. While they're in the room with Reed, knowing they have to, they can't go out the front, he just locks them into what is a long Socratic dialogue. Again, I hearken back to Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
They discuss the nature of belief, the connection between old religions and newer ones.
Mm-hmm.
And he contends that the sisters' religion and belief are based on simple iteration.
He brings out Monopoly, the board
Yes.
game. And he says, do you recognize this game? And they say, yes. And he says, do you recognize this game? And he brings out another game that's called the Landlord's Game. And he explains that the Landlord's Game was actually a game invented by a woman a couple of decades before the game Monopoly, but that then her idea was taken by a man and sold, and he became the first millionaire games designer, basically. And Reed then translates this to iterations of religion, and he brings out the symbols for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yes.
And then plops the Book of Mormon down on top of the Holy Bible and then brings out a copy of the Bob Ross Monopoly game and equates the Book of Mormon to being a zany regional spin-off, essentially. Mm-hmm. And he continues his dialogue about iterations, talking about music and the song Creep.
Yes, which he said comes from an old Hollies song.
Right.
And that later, there was someone else, I can't remember, a young woman artist who again was accused of, Radiohead was accused of ripping off the Hollies. And then there's
Lana Del Rey.
Lana Del Rey was then accused of ripping off Creep. So again, he gets back into iterations.
Exactly. And at this point, I believe this is when he takes the chalk and he writes on the doors.
Yes.
One says belief and one says disbelief.
Yes. And this is also important because offhandedly in the first conversation in the living room, very quietly and very offhandedly, Reed does say, that he found the one true religion. But then never comes back to it. Right. So now we're locked in a room with this guy who's becoming increasingly creepy and sinister.
And kind of unhinged.
And unhinged at this point. And there are two doors, belief and disbelief. And they have to choose which one.
He won't help them. He says he's helping them, but he's actually not helping them. And he's really messing with their mind in terms of like setting everything up for turning their beliefs against them.
Exactly.
And Sister Paxton says, fine, we'll leave through disbelief. And Sister Barnes says, no, we should leave through belief because she's doing reverse psychology on him. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Sister Barnes repudiates his cherry picking about religions because he was trying to equate fandom of religions to importance, essentially, saying like, there are way more fans of Christianity than there are of Judaism. And part of her repudiation is that he completely omitted the Holocaust. At that point, Barnes enters through the belief door.
Right. And of course, this is when we discover neither door leads outside. It leads straight to a basement. And
Basically, it's like a
trapped.
cistern, right?
Yeah, it's very deep, very large. I'm not sure. It's a very old, big house.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite sure what the thing was at some point, but it was clearly repurposed. Like it may have had some industrial use at some point.
Right.
But it's very large and creepy, and it's deep enough. Like there are windows that you can see out to the outside world, but they're so high because the basement is so deep. You can't really see outside, and you can't reach the windows. There's no way out of this place.
And they realize they are trapped.
They are completely trapped.
And there's a table and a chair sitting in the middle of the room.
And Reed, at this point, says, unlike their belief system, he can produce a true miracle right in front of their eyes.
And that's when a very terrifying figure comes in to the room.
Yes.
And you're like, it's a monster. Like, What is this creature? I was just like, this is where things get supernatural, is what it feels like.
Yes, exactly. It's an emaciated woman draped in very thin, very tattered robes.
Mm-hmm.
She enters the room, goes to the table, and eats what Reed explains is a poison pie.
And it's a blueberry pie. So there was a pie baking somewhere.
Right.
Right.
He explains she's going to die, but she's a prophet and will be resurrected.
And that's how he's showing them the one true religion.
Exactly. And the woman eats the pie, and she does indeed die.
Yep. And he puts them through this intense moment of checking her pulse and seeing if she's breathing. And it's disgusting and terrifying.
At this point, Reed becomes distracted. There's noise upstairs. He realizes someone has come looking for the girl. So he leaves them there for a few minutes. And they follow him up the stairs. They're trying to break out of the room. They can't. Mm-hmm. So basically, they leave the prophet for a moment. They leave the body on the floor.
Right.
When they return to the prophet, her body shifted a little bit, but, Well,
Sister Paxton thinks the body moved, and Sister Barnes doesn't.
Exactly.
And we can't tell if it has or not.
Right.
Or if they're just so freaked out at this point.
Exactly. Those little details, they're not sure about, and neither are we, frankly, at that point. There's so much going on.
Right.
But she does rise from the dead. The woman gets up and tells them about the afterlife in this very soft whisper. Paxton is kind of shocked by the whole thing, but Barnes, again, being a bit more worldly, she rejects the whole revelation as being staged, and what the woman suffered resembles near-death experiences. She is not convinced at all.
And Mr. Reed comes down to argue with them about it.
Yes.
At which point we've discovered that the girls have grabbed a letter opener.
Yes.
And they've essentially decided to give each other a signal to try and stab him so they can get away.
And when this happens, Reed, who's had a box cutter all along, slashes Barnes's throat.
And it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
It's right out of nowhere. It's so quick. And you're not even sure for that 1 second what just happened. But then Barnes is down on the floor, apparently dead. That's when Paxton does have a revelation. She does finally understand that every single thing that's happened since they entered the house has been a setup. Mm-hmm. They've been manipulated from the moment they walked in there. Getting them into the basement so that Reed could perform a false miracle by killing a woman, the prophet, and replacing her body with the living one who was the one who gave her the description of the afterlife.
Right. Right. The description of the afterlife, which ended with the words "not real."
Yes, exactly.
And then Reed just kind of goes, he just goes even further out there, and he takes his box cutter, he cuts into Barnes in front of her and pulls out basically her birth control that's in her arm, but gives Paxton this whole screed about how she's an NPC and she's not real and this whole thing is a simulation. And Paxton is like not buying it. She's like, I think things went sideways, and I think this has gotten out of your control.
Exactly.
And he said, so then tell me, how did I switch the bodies? And she figures it out. She realizes there's a drain in the floor and opens it up. And it's a way down. And at the bottom, she sees a body. And he says, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go out? And I remember this particularly too, because earlier when they're in the living room, I think it was Sister Paxton who said, it was Sister Paxton who said, with great power comes great responsibility. And she says, Spider-Man. And Mr. Reed says, no, Voltaire.
Right.
And at this point, when she's looking down the ladder into the hole, she says, I'm going to do it because the only way out is through.
Yes.
And he says, Robert Frost. And she says, no, Swamp Thing. And I love that because it's her turning the tables on his logic.
She finally goes in. She passes through this underground chamber.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Where Reed explains at the end of this walk,
but what she passes through. Yes. Oh, my God. Yeah, sorry.
He tells her at the end of this passage, you will find the one true religion. And
she goes down, and it's just room after room of occult paraphernalia. Mm-hmm. Like all kinds of occult paraphernalia. And she passes through one door, and then there's more occult paraphernalia and symbols on the walls, and it's just like chaotic. And she gets to the last door, and on the last door is the lock to their bicycles.
Yes.
And she reaches in her coat pocket, and she's the one that has the key. And you realize that he put the key in her pocket long, long ago.
Mm-hmm. So he could read them. He could read them so easily, so quickly on, knowing Barnes was going to be trouble, and Paxton was the true believer.
Well, he saw Paxton as the weak one because she was the one with faith.
Exactly.
And that she'll be the easy one to dominate, essentially.
Yes.
That it'll be easy to convince her to get in the cage.
And the cage is when we come into the chamber.
The final chamber.
The final chamber where we find the display of Reed's one true religion. And she finds cage after cage of emaciating women in rags locked in essentially dog cages.
Yeah, and they look ill and they're being misted with something.
Yes.
And you're wondering if there's some drugs or something in the mist.
Mm-hmm. And Paxton has her own revelation where she suddenly understands exactly what Reed means by the one true religion. His religion is entirely based on the idea of control.
Yeah.
Control of others is the only thing that's real. At this point, she knows she's never going to get out. She's going to end up in one of those cages.
Well, she's still believing that she can save them. She put her coat on one of them and is like, I'm going to get you out of here.
But I don't believe her at that point. I think she's
really.
I believe she is displaying hope to cover up her desperation.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good that we disagree too, because this ending is debated. Like
Yes.
everything in the whole third act of this movie is
Yes.
still being debated, argued about. But yeah, the conclusion is that the one true religion is control. And he had sized her up as weak for having faith or being a believer, and that
Hmm.
she'd be the one that he could convince to put herself in the cage.
Finally, Paxton just loses it. And she finally goes for the letter opener and frantically stabs Reed.
Right.
Uh,
And it's actually when the code word is said from the original agreement between the two sisters, which was magic underwear, which was a
yes.
reference to her basically being pantsed in the very beginning of the film by the selfie
Yes.
girls.
Yes.
But yeah, she stabs him at the code word's magic underwear.
And she gets him in the throat. But before she can get away, Reed stabs her with the box cutter he used on Barnes. So Paxton manages to get back in the basement. She runs through all the crazy rooms.
Well, and she tries to get out too, which
Mm-hmm.
is, we see him at some point earlier working on a model, which we think may be a model of the house, but it looks like a mechanical model or one
Yes.
of those Japanese puzzle boxes. And she's running through the house, and we sort of like see this surreal moment of her running inside the model, and she can't figure out how to get out.
Reed.
Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's fine. When Reed comes for her in the basement, what's interesting is he seems, for the first time, he seems not in control. Like he knows things have really gone sideways.
Right. He knows he's going to die.
He knows he's going to die. He seems genuinely scared, but he's still intent on killing Paxton. So Paxton is praying. Reed mocks her for praying. Pray for us. And she says, that's not how prayer works.
Yeah.
You don't pray for yourself.
Well, she says it doesn't work, and he looks shocked.
Yeah.
When she says prayer doesn't work, and he said, "What do you mean prayer doesn't work?"
Yeah.
And she said, and she explains a study that was done where there were two control groups of people who were dying, and one group, they used prayer to see if it, helped the outcome, and it ultimately didn't. And he said, "Then why do you believe? Why do you pray?" And she said, "Because it's nice to know that people care about each other. And that's what gives me comfort."
Yes. Which I think in a way is something else that sets Reed off.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In those last few minutes,
Yeah.
it's like it re-energizes his desire to kill her. However, Barnes, who wasn't dead, lurches up and stabs Reed with a piece of wood that she broke off from the side of the basement.
Yeah.
And then dies at the end.
At which point we see Paxton escape.
Yes.
Running through the maze, trying to get out of the maze, and then escaping out the window. Out into the snow. She throws her phone out, and she's gut stabbed and bleeding.
She has this moment of, after all this frantic stuff, she has this moment of just, I'm out. I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay. And she pauses, and a butterfly lands on her hand. Now, this is important because in that first conversation, she, again, offhandedly mentions that she likes the idea that after death, we become a butterfly. And what she'd like to do is come back and land on the hand of the people she loved, just to know things are okay. So a butterfly lands on her hand, and then we cut from one perspective to another, and the butterfly is gone. We didn't see it fly away.
Mm-hmm.
Was the butterfly there at all?
And that's where this film is like, what just happened?
Yes.
What was that ending?
It leaves a lot of questions unanswered, which in a story about interrogating belief and religion is kind of the point. People want answers, but it's like it's not that kind of movie.
And I on my rewatch, I noticed something that I hadn't noticed before. And it wasn't about that final scene. It was actually about the very first scene of the film. And that was a line that Sister Paxton said that I had missed. One of her and it's easily to be distracted by their conversation in the beginning because they're talking about condoms.
Yes.
But one of the first things that Sister Paxton says is, what else do we believe just because of marketing? And so you realize that Sister Paxton has actually kind of been interrogating her faith the whole time as well. But the question is, I mean, did she die?
You mean Barnes? Or, I'm sorry.
Sister Paxton. Like, she saw the butterfly land on her hand. That was supposed to be her.
Oh, I thought
she was the butterfly.
Oh, I thought the butterfly was supposed to be Barnes coming back to say stuff's okay.
I don't know. I mean, the darker question is it, or was that her faith?
Or was that, yes, exactly. See, that's what kind of a movie this is. We could, in speaking of interrogations, we can interrogate the ending endlessly.
Mm-hmm. Was it her death or the death of her beliefs?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, you could even wonder about Barnes popping back to life. Well, was that the resurrection that Reed was talking about, but didn't expect that it came out because he'd lost control? It came out in a different way. Incredible movie.
Yeah.
And like I said, one you can talk about with your friends for hours.
Weren't you saying that you were seeing a lot of discussion on religious websites about this one?
Yes. I
thought that was so interesting.
A lot of mixed reviews. The Mormon Church, of course, did not care for it. They claimed it glorified violence against women.
Oh, wow.
Some the Catholic sites were a bit kinder to it in terms of actually looking at the ideas it presented and asking questions about faith. So I thought it was going to get murdered by all the religious sites, but several of the ones I checked actually approached it sort of for what it was and a look, an examination of belief. What does belief mean? What does it overall, and how does it affect our lives?
Yeah, I was looking at some discussion on Reddit forums as well, and it is like people are just dissecting the hell out of that third act as well. And also I noticed that like on Google, like it'll be like questions people ask, and the questions people ask that are coming up are, is it okay for Christians to see this film?
Yes. Yes.
Like, I want to say yes.
I want to say yes for the same thing. It's just, again, when I was a kid and in the church, some of the older members of the clergy, the smarter ones, were saying things like, yeah, you can question. There were others when we moved to Texas who did not want you to question anything. They were very rigid. But when I was a kid in New York, it was fine. You know, it's good to test your beliefs, to ask questions, to challenge them, and to see where it brings you. Because they were the clergy were convinced in a kind of gentle way that what you would find is that the belief system is true, at least to the extent of giving you something to believe in instead of just nothing.
Well, and that goes back to Sister Paxton's, comments at the end about prayer.
Yes.
Where she's like, look, I've known this whole time it doesn't work the way that you think that I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives me comfort.
Exactly.
She's like, I have interrogated it and it gives me comfort. And that's why.
We're really watching Barnes through a lot of the movie because she is the strong one. But in the end, Paxton really comes through.
Mm-hmm.
And that I found really nice, that she wasn't left as this naive waif that she seemed to be kind of at the beginning of the movie, just struggling with just existing in the world.
And also existing with concepts of sexuality, like struggling with that. Because a lot of what she talks about, what Paxton talks about in the beginning of the film is sex.
Yes.
And you're like, why is she talking about this? It's clearly upsetting to her, but you realize later she's trying to figure this out. Like she's trying to reconcile, her sexuality with what she's supposed to think about her sexuality.
And it's significant too, because there is a real sexual menace when she's in the room with Reed and all those women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's giving a sermon about control.
Yes.
And you realize that control is about who gets to decide who counts as human.
Yes.
And that's exactly what a lot of this film is about. And I'll also say it's a lot of what Nosferatu is about as well.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So shall we move on to Nosferatu?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, got a segue there. So
yes.
I want to add too, like with Heretic, I'm an atheist. So it's like I respect belief and I respect faith, but I was raised atheist and I'm an atheist. So it's an intellectually really interesting film for me for a lot of reasons. So I'll just put a pin in that. Okay, Nosferatu, which this is the third iteration of Nosferatu on film. It is directed by Robert Eggers, and it stars Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, Bill Skarsgård, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Emma Corrin, Willem Dafoe, and Simon McBurney. And I'll just go ahead and dive in. I especially want to start with the opening scene because it's I think one of the more important ones.
Yeah.
And it's just a stunningly gorgeous film for starters. And the opening scene really establishes just how beautiful and grand and cold feeling everything is. A lot of shadows, a lot of contrasts. It's the early 1830s, and it's this beautiful young woman is in a beautiful estate and this absolutely gossamer nightgown. And this is Ellen. She's played by Lily Rose Depp. And we see her yearning for someone to come to her, to be with her. And this is when we start to see the first images of Orlok. And her desire is essentially so strong that it calls a man or a creature. And we see his shadow hand reaching to her.
Yes.
Then we go to a wide shot outside under moonlight in the hedgerows. And suddenly she's wandering out, and then we flash to seeing her laying in the garden, in the mud, in the hedgerows. And it looks like she's maybe having a seizure or maybe having an orgasm. And she's shuddering and shuddering, and she's reaching for her own throat. And we think she's being fucked by this creature. And this is such an important moment because it describes so much of what's going on with Ellen and Count Orlok. Then we go to 8 years later. Ellen is married and she lives in a German port city with her husband, Thomas Hutter. I think everyone who's seen the Nosferatu films or are familiar with the story are going to know a lot of these things already. The way that this story is told in a much different way than other Nosferatu films, and I think you'll see why pretty shortly. So they're living in an apartment and they're broke. Thomas Hutter works for Herr Knock, who pressures, and that's how they pronounce it, as Knock, who pressures Thomas into the commission of selling a decrepit manor to a reclusive nobleman in Transylvania's Carpathian Alps. Thomas goes home and presents Ellen with the news that he's taking the job, and Ellen pleads with him to stay. And this is another really important scene. Her markers of depression and sadness are so clear and so identifiable if you've ever dealt with depression and sadness, whether on your own or with other people. You can see what she's going through, that this is something she's been struggling with for a really long time. And she wants to tell her husband how disturbed she feels and how happy she is with all of these dark thoughts she's having. And she wants Thomas so badly to be the one who listens, and he wants that too. And you can see how much he loves her because she explains to him that she has this dream where she marries death and everyone dies and she's so happy. And that the only time she's ever felt okay is when he's around.
Yes.
And he's like, don't tell anyone this. And this is important because in the 1830s, it's remarkable. Like, if you know anything about being a woman or a wife in the 1830s, that's a subjugated state of being property. So you know that these aren't things that you tell a man ever. Because in the 19th century, women were committed to asylums on just like the thinnest of evidence. Like the thinnest of evidence. And I pulled out this quote to read specifically about this scene from the University of Warwick, which is, the women that were considered to asylums on slender evidence, notably those who contravened expectations concerning their modesty, conduct, duties, or behavior, or those who would not bend to their husband's will. So that's what's so important about this scene, is because women, it was, you would get put in an asylum. You would be forced into ice baths and electroshock therapy and things like that. So one of the least safest places to be in 1830s is in a female body.
Waiting to be diagnosed with hysteria and or melancholia.
Right.
Which are, you can see them, considering it not just a syndrome or a weakness, but a disease in them.
Mm-hmm. And this is why their connection is so remarkable, because he says he sees the darkness in her, but he loves her anyway. And he warns her to tell no one about her feelings or any of it. But he has to go anyway. He needs to get them things and money and stuff. So he leaves her in the care of his close friend, Friedrich Harding, Harding's pregnant wife, Anna, and their young daughters. So after this point, it's, the part of the film that we all know well, which is Thomas's journey into the Carpathian Alps. And the way it is filmed is an utter delirium. It's just, it's so surreal and so beautiful and so strange. The way the whole thing is filmed and played out, and the timing is off and uncomfortable. And as in the traditional telling of the story, his journey takes him to a town where he's shunned by Roma. He witnesses a vampire staking. He has his horse stolen. Then he's approached in the snow in the dark by an unmanned carriage, which takes him to the Count's castle. Orlok meets with Thomas and subjugates Thomas through the pressure of the property sale and Orlok's royalty. As in other films, Thomas accidentally cuts himself during dinner and blacks out. And this begins a series of blackout feedings. And Orlok, I think a lot of people had expectations because of Skarsgård. Orlok is not a sexy vampire. This is not hot at all. Like, this isn't what people thought they were getting. Like, I think they thought they saw Skarsgård and maybe got him confused with the other Skarsgård in True Blood. But this is not a sexy series of feedings. This is horrific.
I think people also were trying to make this into the Coppola movie Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes, which I appreciate.
But it is the opposite, because the Coppola's movie is based on a romance between this predatory male vampire and the woman who is essentially his victim. And Eggers goes completely against that, and almost the same way he did in The Witch.
Yes.
Where there is a woman's liberation, but it is through an socially unacceptable process.
Yes. And Orlok is feeding on Thomas through his heart. These aren't bites on the neck. This is, while Thomas is blacked out, we see Count Orlok climb on top of him, and he's feral. He drinks straight from the heart. And there are these horrific slurping noises, making it clear these are very deep drinks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's perched on top of Thomas in a way that is so undeniably, uncomfortably sexual that we really begin to see that this is actually a type of triangle with blurred distinction between Orlok's need for renewed vigor and basically his need to penetrate Ellen's man as her proxy. And at one point, even when Orlok comes to Thomas while he's sleeping, we get a brief flash of Ellen in Orlok's place. So it may be that Orlok is enchanting him or something along those lines, but there's no doubt that this is a very sexual situation. This is a very sexual relationship of abuse that's happening here.
And a very parasitic one. It really, the way he feeds directly from the body and not the neck. I mean, again, the traditional sexy vampire, oh, I'm going to bite you in the neck.
Right.
The way he does it is he goes to the heart, he goes through the chest. He is a parasite.
Yeah.
Attacking the body.
Exactly. So while Thomas is there, he signs an occult contract in a total fugue of sickness and dissociation. And while Thomas is gone and Orlok is growing stronger, Ellen suffers from bouts of sleepwalking and seizures while she's staying with her friend and the family that her doctor struggles to treat. And this is another incredibly important moment in this film. And this is also where I want to point out that one of the things that makes this film so stand out to me, and especially in terms of like the Nosferatu canon, is that this for me was the first time Nosferatu has ever been told from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
From Ellen's perspective. And I'll get back to that in a minute, because what's important is understanding like this. I feel like it's such a critical moment of the storytelling where she's sleepwalking and having seizures, and they bring in the doctor to treat her, and he advises tightening her corset, bleeding her and tying her to the bed, which is said in passing very quickly, but this is stuff that was done to women routinely, and it is treated as completely normal. And they mention at one point her past melancholy. And I remember you mentioned melancholy earlier, but melancholy, particularly in the 1830s. And I believe that Eggers and I know how long he worked on this film and how meticulously researched this film was. And this scene also connected to me in terms of, the things that you mentioned with the witch, where it was like a woman's station to behave in certain ways. And in the 1830s, melancholy was a diagnosis. Specifically, it was considered evidence of masturbation in women. And that was under the premise, the societal belief that women should be as well behaved as children. In this era, a good woman has no sexual impulses of her own and is content to mold herself into the shape and receptacle of male desire. The absence of desire in women was considered the cornerstone of a healthy society. And this is what's important here about everything that happens to Ellen, everything that has happened to Ellen to this point, and what happens to her after this. She has somnambulism, troubled nerves. They say she has too much blood. They say that she needs to sleep in a corset because it calms the womb and encourages circulation. They literally say this. He says the doctor encourages her husband's best friend to tie her to the bed, and he smothers her with ether.
Yes.
And he asks Thomas's best friend, "And have you bled her?" He says, "Oh, yes." And he says, "And her menstruations?" And he says, "Oh, liberal." And you realize that these men have just been like going in and out of her body, and draining her of blood. And you're realizing that women aren't allowed to have any sexual agency or any sexual relationship with themselves, for starters, and that they're considered property.
Yes.
Like absolute property. below the station of animals, pretty much. And that's... Go ahead.
What I find fascinating about this too is, at this moment in history, they consider themselves the height of modernity with all this stuff.
And logic and intelligence.
And logic. Exactly. We've left supernatural beliefs, but we're not talking about demons or humors or something. We're talking about science, melancholia and hysteria and bleeding people. This is all science, and we're men and we understand this.
Exactly. So Thomas is in trouble, and Ellen is having convulsions and being gaslit by the men around her. Herr Knock is locked up, we find out. He's gone off the rails. He's locked in an asylum after tearing apart sheep and eating them raw. Ellen's doctor doesn't know what to do. They've done everything possible to this woman that you would do with livestock. And she's still behaving outside of her station. So Ellen's doctor consults his mentor, Alban Erbart von Franz, who's played by Willem Dafoe, brilliantly played by Willem Dafoe, who we find out is a scientist ostracized for his occult beliefs. Von Franz comes in, and he examines her, and he demands that they untie her, and this gives us hope. He then waits until she goes into possession, which she exhibits possession. And we see, while she's exhibiting possession, that she is, in fact, somewhat masturbating. Von Franz says that he believes Ellen is under the spell of the Nosferatu, a demonic plague-bearing vampire. Von Franz says she is cursed, simply cursed, at which point her female best friend is blurting out things like, she just needs her husband. Yes. And then when she asks von Franz why Ellen got cursed, von Franz simply states that demons like lower animals, as in women. So back to Thomas. He tries to escape. He finds Orlok sleeping in a coffin and attempts to stake him. It fails. Orlok awakens
miserably.
Oh, awfully. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you feel so horrible for him at this point. Like nothing is working. He cannot get away. Orlok wakes up and feeds on him again. Thomas finally escapes. He basically just falls the fuck out a window. It's the only way he gets away. Yeah. And he's rescued by Orthodox nuns at a nearby church. Meanwhile, Orlok sets sail for Ellen on, the ship, basically the Demeter, killing the cruise ship, the ship's crew along the way. Orlok and Thomas arrive back at the same time to the port town, and Orlok brings with him plague rats that ravage the populace. Canuck, meanwhile, escapes custody and escorts his master, Orlok, to the manor. Now, we're all in the same place, pretty much. Orlok appears to Ellen, where he explains what he is. And this is important, too. She's not afraid of him.
Yeah.
Because for me, this is one of the key points in the film when I realized, and I was listening to his lines, that he is desire. He is her desire made manifest. He says, I am appetite and nothing more. He says he can't love her because he is the pure element of need and he won't go away. And that's when he's basically saying, I am the part of you that needs. Yes. I am your sexual desire. In monster terms, for the purpose of the film, he explains that he's giving her 3 nights to face him, submit to him in his existence, or he will kill Thomas and everyone else. Ellen tries to warn her friend's husband about Orlok, but he chastises her to know her station. This is also a key scene because she confronts him for tying her to the bed and punishing her for refusing to be a well-behaved child, daring to deprive a man of his control, essentially, of her body. He tells her, know your place, woman, and tells her she must conduct yourself with deference, pray for your husband that you do. He punishes Ellen and a very weak and traumatized Thomas by throwing them out into the plague-infested streets. Sievers and von Franz search Knock's office, believing he's a servant of Nosferatu, Count Orlok, and they're right.
Yes. He's quite
And then,
mad. The scene where that's revealed, the first time we
oh,
see Canuck, and we
oh,
realize that he has sent Thomas away deliberately to his doom, is a
oh my
really
God.
frightening moment.
It's powerful horror, and you have to see it to understand it. And it's a performance that had me stunned, even though it's not major parts of the film. That performance, particularly by Simon McBurney, was just like, oh my God. Like there's never been another Renfield as far as I'm concerned now.
Yeah.
So everyone's starting to get on the same team. The plague is taking over the town, and Thomas and Ellen are back in their apartment. Thomas tells Ellen they need to leave town, and she says, I have to admit something to you. She tells him that she conjured Orlok into existence by being unclean and having impure thoughts. He tells her he believes her, and it's the first time anyone in the film says that they believe her. And he says, yeah, Orlok is real and coming for you. She explains to him how good it felt, that she felt bliss when giving in to desire, aka Orlok, and that Thomas was the first and only person that made her feel unashamed. She says very plainly, he is my shame, he is my melancholy. She then confronts Thomas about abandoning her and falling into Orlok's arms like a swooning lily of a woman. She asks, like, as if she's asking all men in that moment, like, if the money and everything he traded her agency for, are these possessions worth it? Are they worth the plague? At this point, Ellen allows her possession to take over and challenges Thomas to fuck her like Orlok did. And he does, much to our surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she is so happy, and they're having incredibly passionate but also deeply fucking uncomfortable sex. And once he's inside her, she commands him to kiss her, and he does. And it's so heartbreaking, and she demands again, kiss me, kiss my heart, my heart. He does, and she orgasms. This sexuality is so important to the film. It's such a key cornerstone, the way that we connect with each other, the way that we have to deny who we are, and just the moment of kiss me, kiss my heart, and he does, and they both know, right, at this point, that that's how Orlok feeds.
Yes,
like
exactly.
We know what this means.
It's I think it's trying to, back to the Parasite version of this, I think it's trying to make that connection with Thomas to make this thing human and beautiful, rather than the Orlok's version of just taking and taking.
I think it was this scene, though, where I really, really realized that this is a story about the suppression of female sexuality and the restriction of humanity, of female humanity.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my God, of course she would be exhibiting depression and sadness because, you know, she had sexual feelings as a girl, and look at this livestock box she has to live in, you know? Like,
absolutely.
And she made Orlok manifest. And of course, Orlok as the monster, like that's exactly how men at that time must have seen female sexual agency of any kind, you know, or the idea of, you know, women, you know, women who don't know their place, quite literally, to use the lines of this film.
Yeah, a terrifying animal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I've been calling, in my head, I've been calling this film The Chimeras of Womanhood.
Nice.
Thank you. It's very fitting because it's all Cult of the Household Nun, right?
Right.
So, as the film goes, then von Franz's occult research suggests Nosferatu can be destroyed by a fair maiden's willing sacrifice. Orlok kills Friedrich's wife and children. Finally, everyone gets on the same page about Orlok being a monster that must be killed, and von Franz pulls Ellen to the side to tell her, no, she has to be the one to kill Orlok. And I think, personally, that this is where we start to get into, well, I'm going to put a pin in this and come back, because I think I think this point forward is being somewhat misinterpreted.
Okay.
Ellen conspires with von Franz to keep Thomas distracted. Thomas, von Franz, and Sievers go to Grunwald Manor, where they accidentally kill Herr Knock after finding him sleeping in Orlok's coffin. Realizing von Franz's deception, Thomas rushes back to save Ellen as von Franz destroys the coffin. Meanwhile, Ellen, in her gossamer gown in what looks like a bride's dress, summons Orlok to her bedroom and repledges herself to him, distracting him by allowing him to feed on her blood until sunrise when the sunlight kills him. Thomas returns and holds Ellen's hand as she dies. Von Franz covers her and Orlok's body with flowers, which I looked up and it looks like they're posies, actually, which was the plague flower.
Oh, all right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was like, what? Why is he decorating them? I was like, oh, what are those flowers? And then I saw they were posies. So ring around the rosy pocket full of posies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And this scene, like, I mean, it's almost like it's like a painting, right?
Yes.
Where they show Orlok's body essentially just bleeding out on top of her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, again, undeniably sexual. Orlok is clearly, like, they're clearly having sex.
Oh, yeah.
And it's gruesome and gory. And I still don't think it's a sacrifice, though. Like, I feel like... so I've been reading a lot of reviews about this film. Okay. And I have yet to find a review written by a woman or someone who identifies as non-binary. And every single review, so the things that all the male reviewers seem to have in common is that most don't like it. Taken it all together, they can agree on a couple of reasons why, which is it's too pretty, or it's not pretty enough. The film tried too hard, or didn't try hard enough. The sex was too much, or it was dull. The one thing they do agree on, and it sounds like they're talking about a woman, right?
Yes.
And they do all agree on one thing, is that Ellen is the film's damaged purity symbol, and that she nobly sacrificed herself to save humanity from the plague. And I take issue with the idea that it was a noble maiden sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was resignation.
Oh, that's an interesting way to think about it. I hadn't put that together.
I mean, how do you go on when you aren't allowed to be who you are in your body, right?
Yes. And after enduring all the cures and all the attitudes of everyone, the way she's been treated through the entire movie.
She's sentenced to be bled.
Yeah.
You know? And one thing I do like about this film, though, too, is that, just to get back of this whole story being told from her perspective is so fucking interesting. But for me, it doesn't answer the typical male question that's asked of Nosferatu, which is always like, why Ellen? Like, they're always like, why did Orlok choose Ellen? This instead asks and answers the question, which is more logically asked from a female perspective, which is, why Orlok?
Yes.
Why did she summon Orlok?
That's a really good, again, that's a really interesting thought that I did not come to me along the way.
Oh, man. I don't have any, like, I haven't spoken to any women that have seen this film.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that before we started doing our show tonight, because I was like, wow, I've only talked to guys about this film. I've only been able to find male reviews of this film. I haven't talked to any women or trans people or non-binary people about perspectives on this film, nor especially anyone who knows anything about, like, you know, the historical diagnoses of female sexuality as being an illness and just the hundreds of years of suppression that have gone into, you know, keeping us from having, like, sexual agency and enjoying sex, you know, the wrongness of women enjoying sex. Which is a lot of, also, I think, of what The Witch is about, too.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
So I think that Heretic and Nosferatu are in many ways about the same thing. They're about abusers. They're about monster making. They're about monster making being about control. And again, who decides to count as human or not?
And it's women completely being held in place
Mm-hmm.
by in the case of Nosferatu, it's even by the people who care for her, right? Who are
Right.
supposed to, I'm on your side, and they're still getting everything wrong. And again, it comes down to what was, modernity at that point. I just keep coming back to that thought of like, no, that old, we are the crown of creation. We know what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. We can
Right.
fix this. We can fix this. We're men of science. We are men. We are learned men. We will fix this in awful ways and not listen, especially to women.
Right. Right. And the thinking of the time too was that, basically, women and people of color were illogical and uneducated, and their compliance had to be forced
Yeah.
because they didn't understand. They weren't smart enough, they weren't educated. They couldn't be educated, they couldn't be taught.
And it was for their own good.
Exactly.
Which, I don't know, I get the feeling we're coming back to that in this new era, but
Well, I mean, that's probably why why Nosferatu has been resonating with me particularly. And I think it, would resonate with American women in particularly bleak ways right now, considering everything that's going on in the United States, with the loss of abortion rights in, 2022. And then in this December, getting to the point where it's like, basically, abortion is illegal in pretty much half the United States, and interstate travel while pregnant is now illegal in 5 states as of December.
And Texas just indicted a New York doctor for distributing mifepristone through the mail to a woman in Texas.
And, you can write that off as like, oh, abortion rights, blah, blah, blah. But this is, pregnancy is about agency and freedom.
Yeah.
And, being able to have control over your own body and control over the rest of your life. And, we've been enduring in the United States the past, going on 3 years now of doctors refusing to perform procedures on women that are life-saving because they're afraid of running afoul of abortion laws, and women dying as a result, and young girls.
Yes.
And this stuff may not be surfacing for a lot of people news-wise or information-wise, but when you walk around in a female body, you carry that with you. Just seeing that travel was restricted and going on Reddit and finding pregnant women in America, like asking, using throwaway accounts to ask what states are safe for them to travel into is a chilling reality. And the type of misogyny that is espoused by Vance and those guys is violent. It's a violent misogyny. And
yes.
It definitely embraces the same aspirations of the 1830s. Not to get too deep and too dark, but that's why the film, I think, really resonated so heavily for me, because I remembered everything that I had learned about, sexual history in terms of like female sexual history around misdiagnoses and hysteria and, the cures for female masturbation. And like, they literally like would say things like, her hands must be visible while she sleeps because they wander while she sleeps. And they would advise tying women's hands to their bed while they slept. And that was in this film, It's just like, it's all just too, it's all just too much about controlling, female sexual agency and sexual freedom. So anyway, that's my soapbox about Nosferatu.
Two films about control, about absolute control.
Yep. Exactly. And 2 incredible films too, like just absolutely stunning. I don't know about you, but like after I saw Nosferatu, like it took me a while to like be able to really watch anything else, because it was like I just nothing else was going to be good for me for a little
Hmm.
bit in terms of like horror films. Like a
I was
bar
the
has
same
been
way.
set.
I was the same way. I didn't watch anything else for several days. I just kept
Oh,
going over it in my head.
me too. Yeah, I saw it as part of the Terrify Film Fest here in Wellington, and it was a screening that was before it actually came out in theaters. So I was so jonesing, right? I was just like, I need to see this film again to just kind of like make sure I saw what I thought I saw.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. I had to wait until it came out on VOD.
Now, I have a question for you since you saw it with an audience.
Hmm.
Um, how did they behave? Because in my theater, kind of suburban, it was an IMAX, so it had great sound, great picture, but it was still a relatively suburban area. There were moments where people were laughing, and I could not figure out what it was. And it was really uncomfortable to have these uh, moments of, tension on screen that then produced laughs from. There were definitely bros in the audience.
Hmm.
There
Hmm.
were families in the audience. I was sitting next to a man who was just seething through the entire movie. He just hated every moment of it, which was
Really?
really, really interesting to sit in. Yeah, it was an older man with his son. The son was so excited. And the older man was
Totally a
just
film you
sitting.
take your kids to.
And the older man was just arms crossed, scowling, sitting rigid in his seat. I think it was going to be a long drive home for those two.
Oh my God. That echoes though, like so many of the male reviewers I've read that are just like, ugh, the sexuality, ugh, unnecessary, or the nudity was too much. And I'm like, yo, man, this is a story about sex.
Yes.
This is about sex, and that's the important part of this story.
Hmm.
Is it's about female sexual desire, you know? And I get the sense that the reviewers that are like, oh, we didn't need to see boobies and stuff like that. I'm just like, what is your problem with female sexual agency, man? Like
Yeah.
clearly we're this is an uncomfortable thing for you. Women
Right.
being sexual is a problem for you. So I wonder if that was part of it. Like, but at the same time too, I think, well, so in my theater, there wasn't uncomfortable laughter, but I have seen other people talk about that being like that. That's in a couple of the reviews I read as well, that there
Yeah.
were uncomfortable laughter or just like people laughing at different parts of the film. Um, and I think there's a couple of things to that. Like, I think that people were really, this is a very uncomfortable film to watch. It's,
Yes.
it's stunningly beautiful. Like, it's just one of the most beautiful films ever. But it's just, there's no point at the film where you feel comfortable with anything.
Hmm.
And it keeps you on that edge the entire time. It never lets up, really. So I think there's that. But I also think that people went into it having expectations of a sexy vampire film.
Yeah. They,
And
they they wanted Coppola's Dracula,
right.
and I think
Or
the
True
kind of
Blood or something.
or True Blood, and the kind of sex they got was not, pretty, nice lighting, sexy sex. It was not about that.
Right. And I think that a lot of, especially American audiences, are accustomed to having sex served to them in certain ways.
Hmm.
And this was not any of those ways at all.
Yes. And a rejection of that. I think that was part of the discomfort. I think part of it was not not getting at some of the interpersonal tension, like with some of the men controlling her,
Mm-hmm.
uh, finding some of that amusing in some way,
Yeah.
rather than horrifying.
Whereas
So
that's the horror of this film, right?
yeah, yeah.
Is what's done to Ellen.
And I do think she's a hero in a way, but simply because she, not for some nebulous sacrifice, but because she it's not giving in, but
That's the thing. Yeah,
it's
she's not giving in.
She's not giving in.
And that's the mistake of thinking it's a noble sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
That she's the damaged purity symbol maiden.
Yeah.
But she never gives in.
And again, it's like the witch in that there's this strength and this
determination.
Determination of both the women in both of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in both cases, it's a kind of triumph. It's
right. Yeah.
You know, it's a difficult triumph. It's not a pretty rosy one.
No, it's a triumph that's in context.
Yeah.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that too. Like, I love The Witch, and I remember I saw it with a friend, one of my film buddies, and after we saw it, he was like, it was okay. And I was like, are you kidding? That was amazing.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's the same lens where I'm like, okay, you probably don't realize that this is just shit that happened to women, right? Like, this is what women went through by being in a female body at this time. And this film is about someone triumphing, right?
Yes.
It's about someone getting out, someone rising above through the supernatural context of storytelling.
Right. She's not chattel.
Exactly.
You know? She refused.
She refuses it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think
good
film. Two exhausting films emotionally.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, and they came out pretty much around the same time too.
Right.
So it was really, incredible. Again, I'm surprised that Heretic hasn't been nominated for anything. It just, it's shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I did. I'm gonna change the channel a little bit. I did just see the. I saw Companion with Sophie Thatcher in it.
I'm looking forward to that.
Quaid. Oh my God, it's so good. Everybody, it's so good. It's like a Coen Brothers film. It's like horror, but a Coen Brothers film. And Quaid, Boimler from Lower Decks. Oh my God, he's so creepy and awful in it. It's great. It's so good. Oh my God. So that is one. It's out now. Actually, it came out on the 31st, so it's in theaters now.
With Sophie Thatcher.
Yes. I love her so much. And
Me
Yellow
too.
Jackets should be back on soon too, which I think she's going to be in as well.
Great.
What else is coming out? What else is coming up?
I did a quick scan and nothing. I'm hoping you had a better list than I did because nothing grabbed me.
Okay.
Honestly. So tell me your stuff because I need to hear something good.
Okay. Well, I have two more, and one I'm like very meh about. And the other one I'm kind of excited about. So I'll start with the one that I'm meh about, and that's The Monkey. The Monkey is coming out February 21st. It's based on a Stephen King story. And it's from the Longlegs writer-director, and I am not a fan of Longlegs.
Yeah, neither am I.
Okay, yeah. So we are in the minority, and I know your commenters are gonna just rake us through the coals, but Longlegs did not work for me for a lot of reasons. So my expectations are very low for The Monkey. However, it's got two actors in it that I really like. Tatiana Maslany, who was in Orphan Black and was She-Hulk. And
love her.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of her all the time. I just eat up every performance she does with a spoon. I just love her to pieces.
Yes.
And then the other actor in it that I really, really love is Elijah Wood. So,
absolutely.
Right? Because he's been playing some really great psychos, and he's just fun. Like, he's one of those actors where I'm like, I want to see what he does next. Like, this is going to be kind of neat. So it's weird. I'm not excited for the film, but I love these actors, so I'm going to see it.
I wonder if he still has a lot of Lord of the Rings money, because the last few years, all of his film choices have just been crazy. Like, he's not doing anything really big and commercial. So I wonder if he's still living off that money or something, because he's he doesn't seem to be interested in making it big in Hollywood again.
I love that. See, this is I want to see actors when they're like this, when they're like unfettered to just do weird fucking art, right?
Yes.
Like clearly that's, Robert Pattinson is another one,
Yep.
where he's just like, I'm just going to do weird stuff. And you're like, yes, please, more. Hugh Grant,
And
another example
yes.
from, Heretic that we just saw, where it's like,
Chris,
he's just kind of doing what he wants and it's fun.
and the other half of that silly vampire series, Kristen Stewart, is doing great stuff.
Yes. Oh man, I love her so much now. Oh. Yeah, she's another one that's just like, whatever she's in, I'm going to watch it because it's going to be fun for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the other film that's coming out that I'm excited about is Heart Eyes. Have you heard of this one?
I have heard of this one. I just saw a trailer and I don't know. I don't. Is this? I can't tell if they're trying too hard or not. So
Right, I know. It looks like it's going to be fun though. It's a romantic comedy slasher about Valentine's Day. The tagline is "Stay single, stay safe," which I love because I'm single and I like being single. So I'm like, woohoo! I am going to be safe from Heart Eyes. But it looks silly. It looks kind of saccharine. It looks very slashery. I'm seeing a bit of the early reviews and they're pretty good so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's apparently goopy and gooey in all the right ways. So,
oh, that's great.
I know. And
right.
Fun fact, which I learned before. When I saw Companion, it was again for the Terrify Film Fest here in Wellington, New Zealand, Aotearoa, and they mentioned Heart Eyes and they showed the trailer for it. And fun fact about Heart Eyes, it was mostly filmed in Auckland here in Aotearoa. But it is Auckland made to look like Seattle.
Interesting.
Right?
All right. Well, now I want to see it just for that.
Right? You and I are going to be like locations, looking at it for locations, for sure.
Exactly. I love that New Zealand is being used a lot more for films that aren't Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Same.
That New Zealand has its own burgeoning horror
so good
system going. Terrific stuff.
I feel like, there's definitely a horror renaissance happening here. And I want to actually talk more about that at some point. Because I'm like nerding out on it so hard. It's so great. All right. So do you have any books that are on your, any pre-order buttons we need to mash?
I do have some books. The first one is Bowling with Corpses by Mike Mignola.
Oh my God. A, what a great title. And B, I love him so much. Oh.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Mike Mignola is the creator of Hellboy.
My heart.
And if you read this series, you'll know he often incorporated elements of folk and fairy tales, characters plucked out of different times and cultures.
So good.
Now he's on to a new related project with Bowling with Corpses. In it, Mignola is creating a whole new world of his own. It's not Hellboy. It's not something he's done before. It is a third place, and then he populates it with characters and stories drawn from folklore all around the world.
Cool.
An example is that the title story, Bowling with Corpses, is based on an Italian folktale.
What?
And others are from places as far apart as Ireland and Japan.
Oh my God, this sounds amazing.
It's beautiful writing, beautiful art, as always, from Mignola.
God. I know.
And Dave Stewart and Clem Robbins, who are the colorist and letterer, really show up. They do a great job too. If you like graphic storytelling and just a beautiful looking and reading book, I think Bowling with Corpses is going to make you very happy.
I need this. I absolutely need this. Like I have all of the Hellboy, like all of it. I feel like I have everything he's ever done, actually. And I also have the big oversized hardcovers that came out with the Hellboy films.
Oh yeah.
And I brought them with me here. So I've
Oh,
got
great.
my own little Hellboy library down here in Wellington. So, but yeah, I need this. This sounds incredible, and I love that
It's
it's
true.
folklore from around the world too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I knew it was going to be good, but I was surprised at how much I loved the thing. I mean, it was
Cool,
really,
cool.
really grabbed me.
I love it. I love it.
Do you have one? Do you have a book? I have another, but do you have one?
I only have one right
Mm-hmm.
now. So, and that is coming, it's not out yet. It's coming out May 6th, and I wish it would come out sooner. It's called The Butcher's Daughter, and it is the hitherto untold story of Mrs. Lovett by David Demchuk and Corinne Leigh Clark. And basically, it is the story of Sweeney Todd's partner in crime, based on the Penny Dreadful. So it is the woman who baked the pies. I know, I'm so excited. And I'm such a huge fan of David Demchuk. Like I particularly so he's written two that are definitely to our taste here. Red X, a novel in 2021, which is just it's definitely one of the scarier horror books I've ever read. And it's basically about an otherworldly serial killer during the time of the AIDS crisis in Canada, in the gay scene, the queer scenes. And then the other one that he wrote that I also love is The Bone Mother from 2017, which is just the freakiest Slavic mythology folk horror. Like it's basically chapters that it's one giant story told in separate chapter stories, and
Oh,
it's
nice.
freaky and it's creepy and it's wonderful. But yeah, The Butcher's Daughter, I think this is going to be a really, really fun one. So I'm looking forward to that. I've already pre-ordered it. So
That sounds great. Oh yeah,
yeah,
I have to get on
I'm
that too.
I'm thrilled. What else you got? What else you got? Anything else?
The Contortionist's Handbook by Craig Clevenger.
Ooh, what's that?
It is, well, first off, it's a reissue of a 2002 book that has a really a very strong and cult following, but
Okay.
it's been very hard to get a hold of for years. So it's nice to have this back again.
Ooh.
Um, on its surface, it's kind of a simple crime story, but as it goes along and the fear and paranoia of the protagonist mount, it takes on a quiet, horrific sense.
Okay.
Now,
Cool.
the protagonist is John Dolan Vincent. Now, he suffers from terrible migraines and blackouts, so he self-medicates with painkillers. And this is just fine for a while. But one night, he messes up and he ODs. And he wakes up in the hospital. Doctors, being doctors, of course, they assume the OD was a suicide attempt, and they won't release him until he undergoes a psych evaluation.
Okay.
But he has a big problem. Vincent, John Dolan Vincent is a forger with more than one identity.
Oh.
So the hospital isn't examining John Dolan Vincent. They're examining Daniel Fletcher, one
Oh
of his
my
criminal
God.
aliases.
Oh, cool.
So with the authorities looking, kind of looking askance, with criminals from his past closing in, he has to convince his doctor that he's all right and stable enough before he can make his getaway.
Oh my God, this sounds fun.
It's steeped in rising tension and paranoia, with his attempt to keep his two personas functional until he can get out of this situation. It's just really a fun book. It's as good now as it was in 2002, and I'm really hoping it gets the audience it deserves.
Oh my
And
God, that's fantastic.
as a bonus, in this new edition, there's an introduction by the terrific crime writer Jordan Harper, the author of She Rides Shotgun and The Last King of California.
Right,
So
right.
you get two really great writers in one book. I really recommend this highly. The Contortionist's Handbook.
Is it out now?
It is out now, very
Oh,
recently.
good. Oh, good, good. Because I need to put something on my Kindle. So that's perfect.
And yeah, those are mine. Two good books. Bowling with Corpses is just so much fun.
Oh, yay. I can't wait.
I just love Mignola's work.
I'm like now completely intrigued. I'm like, what is that story? What does that mean exactly? Because I know what my mind is inventing for that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, corpses as bowling pins. Like, what's going on here? We're using a head as a bowling ball.
Anything is possible.
All right. I think that's it. I think that's what we got for this episode.
I think so.
All right. Well then, everyone, thank you for joining us on Raised by Horror. In our next episode, we'll be talking about what's coming to streaming sites in February, particularly the good horror stuff. So, until our next episode, find us on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and raisedbyhorror.com. Look for Richard Kadri at richardkadri.me, Violet at violetblue.com, and all the usual social sites.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.